If I ask you to think of the biggest Dota event of the year, what comes to your mind? TI Finals? Getting to see new champions of the year? Drama, all the kicks, betrayal and cancellations? Maybe big patches? Well, this one we don't get to have these days. But generally most of the time it's the TI Finals, right? It's the biggest event of the year for Dota. Well, the biggest event of the 2016s was not the TI Finals, as it usually is for the Dota scene. The biggest highlight of that year was the fact that a team with a 5k MMR player won against the OGs that were at their peak at the time. Miracle was arguably the most individually skilled player of that year. It was also his first year of playing professionally for Team OG, and it was one of the most dominant performances of a single player in the history of Dota 2.
Miracle's peak was also, usually what I say was the highest Dota peak, right? For a player. Back then he was just better than everybody for a while.
If I have to exclude myself, then yes, I would agree.
This year Miracle gave us a lot of timeless highlights, such as winning Frankfurt Major,
Towards out the buyback. Oh, Miracle, he's gonna run into RTZ again! Max had him, the illusions, nothing.
becoming second person to hit 8k MMR, and then later becoming first one in the world to hit 9k MMR, creating a new standard for playing on the core position. Also, he had these 4 consecutive playoff games without a single death, 43-0 KDA performance at the Manila Major. Then actually winning this major. Also this Invoker highlight. I remember watching this play live, and being an Invoker spammer myself, this highlight hyped me up so much to spam Invoker back in the day. And this Shadow Fiend juke, which is generally considered as one of the greatest jukes in Pro Dota. And many more incredible highlights. Also need to mention that MMR cap break was a much bigger deal, because individual skill was more impactful than it is currently in Dota. Also winning multiple majors was also arguably more impactful, since both the prize pools and productions of the first majors were on a very high level. On the other side of the battle we had 59 and 88. That was the exact rating of the TNC team's captain at the moment of the clash between Team OG and TNC in the losers bracket of a TI6 playoffs. Okay, so how did that happen, that this incredibly talented player has lost one of the most important games of his career, I hope that everybody agrees on that take, to on objectively lower mechanically skilled opponents? TNC vs OG match was not actually a clutch, since it actually ended with a 2-0 for TNC, even though OG were highly favored throughout the whole time. OG were highly dominant pre-TI, as I've said earlier, they won 2 majors in the season, and in group stages they finished in first place, compared to TNC, who were not even in the upper bracket. So how come that OG were unable to win a single map? Maybe I am wrong and TNC were actually a much better team that year. Well, yes and no. It's an actual fact that TNC were a better team that day, since they won the series. But if we compare every factor objectively, in the season and coming to the TI, OG were much stronger, and it was reflected in the predictions. I think many of you are similar with the TI effect. It's not a rarity for a top-performing team to crumble under the pressure, as well as for a dark horse to find a momentum to shine on a tournament such as TI. All of the TI participating teams are preparing for months to come up to that tournament. And sometimes some of them might end up burning themselves out, some of them might crumble under the pressure, and some of them might just simply fail to find a perfect strategy of that patch. And OG were kind of overcomplicating their strategies. It looked like they were sticking too much to their comfort zone and had a bad time adapting to the meta. So OG's confidence cracked even before the TNC's match, because they had actually lost to MVP in the winner bracket. In the third game against the MVP in the winner bracket playoff, they picked Sven Core against already great heroes versus Sven that can both deal with him and also dictate the fast pace of the game. It is impossible for me to say for sure, of course, but it looked like their incredible performance of the season and the fact that their base form was just simply heads better than other teams. Those factors, be it consciously or subconsciously, affected their strategies. Because in the retrospective, if we look at the drafts, it seemed like they were kind of arrogant or at least careless for disregarding the enemy's counter-picking threats. So in game 1 it was PL that was shutting down both Medusa and Drow Ranger, reminding you that at that time Drow didn't have the armor-piercing ultimate, so it was a really good matchup for the PL, because he can become tanky enough to be unkillable against the physical damage. It is also pretty easy for him to gap close against the draw ranger, so her ultimate will be turned off most of the time. And I hope that you already understand why PO's mana burn and elusiveness was especially great against Medusa. And if this map's draft can be still somewhat debatable, then the second game draft was a complete mess from OG. In the second game they have left Huskar in the pool, when they absolutely had no answer to that hero. It was by far the biggest mistake of that tournament. Huskar of that time, if there were no counters to him in the draft, he was one of the cheesiest free-win heroes. Literally, if your team is vulnerable to Huskar, you just can't stop his snowball. But let's return to the Miracle. Miracle was insanely consistent throughout the whole season, and he kept performing during the TI too. Even in the bad matches, Miracle almost never had a bad game, because his insane micro has been carrying him and his team really hard. This Invoker highlight was maybe one of the most brutal and stylish wiping in Dota's history, and it was also made during this TI, and against the same team, against the TNC in the group stages. And in one of the most unfavorable and basically unwinnable matchups of that time, Ember Spirit against Huskar, he somehow managed to show his teeth. Enemies from TNC made sure to make a free lane even easier for Huskar, drawing first blood from Miracle, ganking him on mid. But he still managed to win the lane against the hardest counter pick, killing Huskar as Ember on level 6. Miracle was playing on the max capacity, trying to squeeze the win out of his draft, but in a strategy game such as Dota, sometimes it's just not possible. So even though Miracle was playing out of his mind, that didn't help the fact that it was miles harder for OG heroes to win. OG did pick their comfort heroes, but a TI is a very different tournament, where what was working before could not work here. All the teams that get to TI, they try their hardest to prepare for the tournament, as even the mediocre team of the season can gain a lot of strengths and momentum. Whereas many favorites and seemingly unstoppable teams have lost not even close to the champion's place many times. So when OG were not performing as well as they usually were, TNC on the other hand were playing like a beast. Don't blame it all on OG state. TNC were actually playing really well this series, because I remind you, it was a clean 2-0 from TNC. And in this TI, this C team was ready to slay. Both their draft and game movements were on point in that series. TNC were not scared or ashamed to brutally counterpick and punish the enemy when they could. You don't need a superstar player like Miracle if the whole team plays polished and as a unit. This game series will go down as one of the biggest non-TI winning moments of Dota's history. Even if we compare the views from the popular Dota highlight channel, shout out to Noob from UA, TNC vs OG has 3 million views, while TA6 Finals has only 1 million. TNC performance really shook the world of Dota that year, and this match will go down as one of the biggest sensations of Dota esports. So as I stated, this is a screenshot portraying the player's MMR at the moment of the clash. 5988 MMR. Individual skill-wise, OG were at an insane height that year, and Miracle in particular was the pinnacle of mid-game play that year, with his infamous 9k MMR skills. But his 9k MMR skills lost not to the player with 5988 MMR, but to a team. Later, Miracle will prove that TI6 was his mistake. He didn't feel like repeating again by winning 2017's TI. And TNC will forever stay as a crowd's favorites, as being one of the biggest underdogs glow-ups in the history of Dota, being a team from C that proved that talent and individual skill is far from being everything. Disclaimer, the player was later accused of many bad deeds, but I would ask you to separate the plays from the player. I do not support his behavior regarding the controversies, but I do support the strong team play and great Dota matches. That's why I decided to cover it on my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you like this format. If you feel like it, you can leave a like. Regardless, thank you guys so much for watching, and see ya in the next one, guys.